The following podcast may contain words, phrases, themes, and/or situations that some may consider offensive or triggering. You have been warned. Welcome to the Disgruntled Cinephile. I'm your host, Stephen Vargas. This is a podcast where we discuss all things film and why the internet has kind of ruined it for me. Thanks for tuning in to the debut episode of The Disgruntled Cinephile. I'm your host, Stephen Vargas. Each week we will discuss and review films, as well as discuss why current online film culture is ruining it for me. This is part of the Lazy Geeks Network, and you can find other content we produce at thelazygeeks.com. And just so you know, we are accepting donations for all shows on the Lazy Geeks Network. And if you would like to get a shout out for your donation, head over to thelazygeeks.com/donations for more details on how to do so. Now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, we'll be right back with more after this. For over a decade, we've heard about how evil Democrats and anyone that didn't subscribe to their MAGA ideology are denigrated to the point of being dehumanized, to which if something happened to anyone outside of their cult, it would be met with applause and laughter. A party's ideology that focused on draining the swamp and destroying child traffickers until it became apparent that who they were after was their own soul. Then they were miraculously fine with it. Every accusation is a confession. Great American Shit Show will focus on the hypocrisy of MAGA and how it brought out the ugliness within America's soul. MAGA didn't create their racist, homophobic, xenophobic base. It gave it permission to come out into the light, using policy, religion, and their media to say that it's okay to be this way. Season 2 will focus on the Christian nationalism that is embracing MAGA and welcoming of child sex offenders, as well as how conspiracy theories and evangelical Christianity share a lot of overlap. If you listen to the original Modern GOP series, it'll be a return to form. Join me for a reboot of Great American Shit Show with new episodes coming this summer. If your society has lost the art of irony and nuance, then you need to thank our Great American Shit Show. Back in 1988, Warner Brothers announced that a new actor would play Batman since Adam West in the 1960s. Michael Keaton was set to play the Caped Crusader in Tim Burton's version of Batman. Obviously, this was way before social media, YouTube, and Reddit. Hell, there wasn't even the internet. But man, you heard the backlash about the casting. You read it in magazines, heard it on the radio and on television. Many people didn't believe that he had the mannerisms to pull it off. And up to that point, his most successful movies were comedies. And I knew him from Mr. Mom, Gung Ho, and one of my favorite all-time movies, Johnny Dangerously. But did I think he could pull off Batman? No, not really. I also remember back in 1987, when Paramount announced a new Star Trek series was coming to television. It would take place 80 years after the original series. They announced the new captain, some British actor named Patrick Stewart, and the only name I recognized was LeVar Burton, and I knew him from Roots. The other actor I recognized was Brent Spiner. He played this yokel from Night Court. Oh God, I loved his character on that show. He was so funny. And so I was excited to see what he was going to do here. And there were news stories that showed people protesting in front of Paramount Studios, chanting that this wasn't their Star Trek. Bring back the original crew. And at the time, the original crew was still filming movies. And the year before, The Voyage Home was their biggest hit to date. And I remember people protesting The Last Temptation of Christ, Dogma, and Basic Instinct for what they heard the film was supposed to be about. Kevin Smith trolled the protesters for his film Dogma by protesting with them. And since nobody knew what he looked like, he was even interviewed by a news reporter as a protester saying that the film is smut and should be banned. Now, keep in mind, all of the films I mentioned were hits. Michael Keaton suddenly became the OG Batman for many Gen X and older millennials. Star Trek The Next Generation was a ratings hit and lasted for 7 seasons and 4 movies, spawned 3 spin-offs, and had a 3-season revival. The Last Temptation of Christ was a financial hit. It made $34 million against its $7 million budget, and that's nearly 5 times its budget. Dogma made $31 million against its $10 million budget, and normally movies have to make 2.5 times its budget to break even, so it wasn't a failure, but many seem to lump it as a failure because of the protests. And I saw that movie twice in theaters. However, religious movies that aren't made for Christians do not tend to do well in theaters. But that was the thing. Internet culture now was the same as it was before back in the 80s. My major problem with social media is that it's designed to give people a voice. Every person has a voice, but no one thought to ever ask, should everyone have a voice? You have Snyder Bros twisting themselves into a pretzel to call James Gunn's Superman a failure simply because they don't like it. And they are spinning their wheels now, hoping, or should I say manifesting, Supergirl is a failure. One of the silliest things about it is when Sasha Calle, a woman of Colombian descent, was cast in The Flash as Supergirl, the Snyder Bros hated it. They were upset because they didn't get a blonde white girl to play the role, and because they didn't care about comic accuracy. And the same group that loved that Batman killed, which wasn't comic book accurate. Also, they hated the television version, which was another white woman, and now they get a blonde white woman to play Supergirl, and they're still complaining. This is what I say is exhausting. But these guys won't say the quiet part out loud, the real reason they hate it. So, we're going to set some ground rules for this podcast first. And I will direct my annoyance at Snyder Bros, purists, anti-intellectuals, as well as film intellectuals and film reviews that occupy the YouTube space. And this is a podcast that believes that even in the worst movies, there is something positive in it. Maybe it's a scene, an actor, music choice, or a shot. Because my motto is, we can all like movies for different reasons. You just don't need to be a dick about it. And we'll be right back with more after this quick break. Hey there, podcast listener. Stephen Vargas here, host of The Lazy Geeks, Great American Shit Show, and my latest, The Gen X Construct. For the next couple of months, we are fundraising to help pay some bills. We have reached that time of year where we need to pay for renewals of the domain and hosting of the site. And for many years, I've funneled the cost to keep them going. One of the main purposes of these kind of ads were to make these shows and sites self-sustaining. And we don't need a lot, but every little bit helps. If we exceed the amount we need, we'll use it to upgrade some of the equipment that needs to be upgraded, like headphones, monitors, mouse, and maybe move to paid programs like Adobe Audition. I know they're the evil empire, but honestly, I like it better than Audacity. And maybe it can replace my hand-me-down computer chair that slowly sinks when I sit in it for more than 5 minutes. If you know, you know. Now, if I don't get that much, I can obviously get the bougie food for Oliver, maybe even treats or some toys. He deserves it. And if you would like to help us out during this time, you can click on the various links in the show notes for PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, or Zelle, or you can go to the website, thelazygeeks.com/donations, and get more details there. All donations will get a shout out on all the shows, and we appreciate you and hope you can help a brother and his cat out. Now, back to the show. As I said earlier, when they decided to give everyone a voice, no one took a minute to think if everyone should have a voice. Within this sponsor culture, it's difficult to assume that every bad take is something someone truly believes, or they're just doing it for clicks. Make outrageous comments to get engagement, primarily on platforms like Twitter and YouTube. What platforms like Twitter and YouTube only see the rates and not the content, meaning that they don't see what the people were saying to encourage that interaction. It's much in the same way Charlie's Angels 2 and the Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer were sequels that many people lambasted. Movie studios saw theater grosses and made sequels, but never looked at what people were saying about them. And when people have a quote-unquote hot take, that is usually a phrase that I block on threads. Because one, it isn't a hot take, and that isn't the first time someone said that. And two, they're trying to get engagement. They're bomb throwers. Simply people trying to hijack the conversation. You see that a lot on Twitter and Reddit. Now, the ground rules that I'm placing for this podcast are for a reason. One, they actually mean what they are supposed to mean. And two, this is how I will be discussing films. And three, nonsensical theories won't be tolerated. Some phrases people on the internet get wrong, especially those that never truly studied film or come at it from observers of film and heard the term on social media once. To kick it off, plot holes. Just because something doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean that it's a plot hole. A plot hole is something that happens in a film that negates something that has been established within the film. Not a logical fallacy, not something you missed, or you leaving out a small bit of information that was established in the film, but you chose to ignore it. Cinema Sins, the YouTube channel, does this constantly. Plot holes are more rare than people on the internet claim. A plot hole would be, and I've used this example before, if a character was allergic to peanuts. They established that in the film and within the characters. And then suddenly, in a scene, the character is eating a jar of peanuts. No one says anything, nothing happens. Then later in the movie, they remind the audience that the character is allergic. A great one would be if a character is a pacifist. He doesn't believe in combat and has never been in a fight in his life. Suddenly, in the climactic third act, a boss fight happens and he comes out wielding a weapon, and then suddenly a Mary Sue. But even within that, no one acknowledges that he's fighting. It simply is normal to him. And I've seen reaction channels use the term plot hole to explain something they didn't like or understand. And that's not how that works. Just because you don't like what the movie did doesn't mean plot hole.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Next is cameo. I used to never include this, but I've seen increasingly more people misusing that word. Most recently, someone was talking about Robert Downey Jr.'s role in Spider-Man Homecoming, listing that as a cameo. The character was a clutch in the movie. I mean, he's literally on the poster. He was paid $10 million for literally 8 to 10 minutes of screen time. Cameos are a brief appearance in a movie that come out of nowhere. Usually a small one and done moment. Chris Evans' appearance in Free Guy is a cameo, not his appearance in Deadpool and Wolverine. Christian Slater's one and done appearance in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. That is a cameo. They even darken his face with less light to not draw attention to who was saying the line. Danny Glover's random appearance in Maverick with Mel Gibson, a nod to their Lethal Weapon franchise, which was directed by the same director. Now, any character that appears in more than one scene and longer than a few seconds is not a cameo. And I can't believe I have to explain that. Lazy writing. I linked this up with plot holes. Just because there's a scene you didn't like doesn't mean it's lazy writing. The true definition of lazy writing is, quote, shortcuts taken by an author or screenwriter that compromises story integrity, pacing, or character development, end quote. The thing is that lazy writing has many examples. The most common example is Dos Ex Machina. The film is rife with lazy writing. The biggest complaint is at the end of the film. Too many things happen by chance. People or actions happening out of nowhere is usually unearned. Lazy writing works off cause and effect. Now, that doesn't mean great movies don't have lazy writing moments. Much of that is usually production issues or reshoots. Some major through line was cut, which happens for many reasons, and they reshoot a lazy writing scene to piece some elements together without keeping the whole subplot. Now, if you watch Hallmark movies, you see lazy writing is actually a trope within the film. The concept of show, don't tell is lost on those movies. Good writers structure scenes about a character that establishes everything we need to know about the character or relationship. Watching character introduction of James Donovan, played by Tom Hanks in Bridge of Spies, that monologue he gives near the beginning of the movie, or the introduction of his character, explains everything you need to know about the character without other characters saying it. Same with Mark Zuckerberg, played by Jesse Eisenberg in The Social Network. That bar scene at the beginning of the movie tells you everything you need to know about their version of Zuckerberg. His insults to Erica and all her thoughts and opinions. His constant superiority and constant diminishing of her. But when called out, he backtracks. The first 10 minutes of Up, Carl and Ellie, we see when they meet as children, and we get a montage. No dialogue, just visuals of their life, from the scene of them getting married to taking over that abandoned house, building a life together, seeing them grow old, finding little moments when they want to have a child and then find out that she can't have a child, seeing them grow old, missing out on their main goal, what they had when they were children, and then her passing within the first 10 minutes of the movie. And within that first 10 minutes of the movie, you have an emotional connection to those characters. You feel for them. They're such good people. They love each other. They're living their life, and life happens. And by the end of that 10 minutes, it sets the emotional template for that film, the emotional drive for Carl to get to South America. And it kills people at the end because that's how life is. I remember watching that movie in theaters, and within the first 10 minutes, you're hearing grown men sniffling at the end of those 10 minutes. I had a friend that told me, "Oh, I saw Up. Fuck you, Pixar." Now, lazy writing is kind of a guilty pleasure in those Hallmark movies that I mentioned. It violates everything you learn when you study screenwriting. Jill, oh my God, how long has it been? 15 years? The last time I saw you, we were graduating high school, and the next day you disappeared without a word. There are a few moments when you find brief glimmers of actual good writing skills used in those movies. But it's very brief. Blink and you'll miss it. Now, television shows usually fall victim to this, but that's for a different reason. You have 40 to 42 minutes without commercials to tell a story and fit the threads of B and C storylines. But many prestige television shows still manage to do it or get a little creative. Something can't be classified as lazy writing if it is simply something you don't like or don't understand. That's more of a you issue. Next is woke. A term woke originated in African American vernacular English in the early 20th century, originally serving as slang for being alert to racial prejudice and systematic discrimination. And like many things, white conservatives co-opted the term to mean, well, apparently everything. The term has become a catch-all or code word for anything that doesn't serve the conservative white agenda. If a film or series contains a person of color, a member of the LGBTQ community, or the lead is female, God forbid the character is all three, as we saw the male conservative outcry over Star Wars The Acolyte or Star Trek Discovery. The problem is that none of this has anything to do with the media at hand. It is a code for people being misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, or racist. Or all of those things. And of course, those people will either say everything has always come down to race. And the truth of the matter is that no one can thoughtfully explain why something is woke. There is a reason for that. And if they said honestly why it's woke, they would be definitely labeled one of those labels that I mentioned just a minute ago, if not all of them. And in many instances, woke is usually thrown alongside with terms like trash or the aforementioned lazy writing. And this falls alongside of people talking about how Star Wars, Star Trek, or Doctor Who was much better before it had gone woke. And the people that those franchises, the thing is that those franchises were already woke. You just became a shitty person. And their argument is quickly debunked when you look at old episodes of said shows or franchises and see that they were always about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The problem is that many of these things you loved were before the hard right conservative agenda took hold. It's similar when people say that they loved that movies like Blazing Saddles couldn't be made today. Their reasoning? Because too many sensitive people would be offended. However, it would be those exact people that would call it anti-white and woke garbage if it was released today. It makes white people look like idiots. It is anti-fascist. A black man is the lead and the smartest person in the film. And this is where film critique runs into a major problem. And anti-intellectuals love to claim that they never went to film school or studied it. This allows them to have an honest opinion. However, that critique is simply trashing the film to the point where you wonder if they actually saw the film or understood the concept. Primarily when you hear that exact phrasing among many in the right-wing space. Now, that isn't to say that you can't have a negative opinion about something, but it needs to be specific. Example of how is it woke or garbage. And as I've gotten older, I've come to see how far right and left view content like this. And it's usually through a superficial lens. And when I mean superficial, I'm actually talking about surface level. I once read an article from the Daily Beast about an episode of Ted Lasso, and they complained on how the female lead was mishandled because of the male writers. And upon reading the review, I began to wonder if we actually saw the same episode because I couldn't pinpoint anything she claimed in that episode. Same for people of color describing the Michael Douglas film Falling Down as a white man fantasy film. And that is something that's someone who didn't dig into the nuance because they chose to never dig deeper into these themes and character arc. And while right wings simplify their critiques to woke and lazy, wannabe intellectuals will say a lot of words that don't actually mean anything when you put them all together. Now, the last two I'm going to try to be quick on. First is reshoots. When people start questioning how well a film is due to reshoots. Now, this explains that you don't know anything about how the movie industry works. Reshoots happen all the time. Every major studio film has reshoots. Reshoots happen after the first cut of a film is put together and things need to be trimmed down. And when you hear some film is 4 hours long, that's normal. But when you see it together, you start to look at things from a different perspective. Maybe you have too many scenes that are repetitive. hammering a certain aspect of the film too hard. Maybe a subplot isn't working. Maybe a whole character didn't work out. Or something major happens and you need to do massive changes. Like the whole third act of X-Men Apocalypse needed to be reshot because another movie used a similar idea. Or an actor has become so toxic that they need to hire a new actor to replace them and reshoot their scenes, like Kevin Spacey in All the Money in the World or Chris D'Elia in Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. It's commonplace. Now the next one, cult classics. The definition. This came to my attention recently. When I was watching a reaction channel, they called Back to the Future a cult classic. After that, I immediately stopped watching the video. Some modern people are using the definition as, quote, a movie with a dedicated fan base, end quote. So by that logic, Star Wars, Marvel, Fast and the Furious, Harry Potter, and Lord of the Rings are all cult classics. The full definition of a cult classic is a film that is either bombed, underperformed, or was underappreciated when it was released and became popular either from cable, video rentals, or now streaming services. The original Tron is a cult classic. It bombed when it came out in the 80s, and over years it built a dedicated following and was much more appreciated for its technical advancements after the movie bombed and appeared on cable and was out for VHS rentals. Other movies like Flash Gordon, The Warriors, Clue, and Rocky Horror Picture Show, to name a few. Back to the Future was one of the highest grossing films, if not the highest grossing film, of 1985. And this is where I'm going to cut off. Otherwise, this would be a long-running series, and no one has time for that, and especially me. And obviously, as we reach into the series, I will probably add other episodes if I'm running into a block of films of a certain time. One thing that has turned me on online movie culture is the inability to have fun. Not sit there and worry about the physics of something, like this disingenuous discord over Supergirl having fucking earrings. No one discusses how Superman shaves, but Supergirl is where you draw the line. Or in the latest clip from Spider-Man Brand New Day, there's a shot of Spider-Man doing a webbing tornado, and someone wrote on Threads, quote, wouldn't he get dehydrated / fatigued using that much organic material? I wonder what logic MCU will use to explain this on a scientific approach, end quote. What scientific approach a studio would use for a fictional character that was bitten by a radioactive spider and got superpowers? Just stop it. Movies were made for various reasons. Art, to tell a personal story, to entertain, to make people aware of something. And if you have no interest in a film, fine, don't watch it. But stop trying to make it sound like you're more intellectual than you are. It doesn't help you and gives me another person to block. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what I'm doing here, you have two ways to help. One, if you'd like to make this show self-sustaining, buy me a Dr. Pepper or feed my cat his bougie food. You can make a one-time donation through either PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, or Zelle. Check the show notes for details and links. Or two, you can share us on social media or review us on Apple Podcast or Spotify. This will make the algorithm gods promote our show to an unsuspecting public. You can check out all my other content, including my other podcasts, at thelazygeeks.com. You can also stalk me on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, and TikTok at The Lazy Geeks. And if you're old school, email me at thelazygeeksnetwork@gmail.com. That's it for me this week. Until next time, we can all like movies for a different reason. We just don't need to be a dick about it.